please welcome the incredible Emily Cincotta.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be here.
I love how we connected. It was on Instagram, right?
I know.
I found you and I was like, what did I say? Hey, Emily, good morning. I was just like, want to come on my show? And you're like, yeah, let's do this.
The power of the internet, you know?
It is. And I think it has a lot to say about the work that you do because it's reflective in how I found you, but just how you show up online. I loved it. I was like, the energy is great. Who you are is great. And I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Well, I am so glad that we're here, and thank you so much.
Yay. Okay. So first off, I need to know, where are you from?
Originally, I am from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, but now for the last 7 years or so, I've lived out in Los Angeles. Traded
Ooh.
the winter for the sunshine.
Yeah, Wisconsin, that's like practically Canada.
Yes, it is. It is cold.
Cold and snowy, but then the summers are hot and
I will
beautiful.
say they know how to take advantage of summer there. If you have to go in the summertime. Everybody's out. They really milk those summer months, and it is beautiful.
Makes you appreciate it. I grew
Yes,
up in
it does.
Northern Ontario and we got the four seasons, like we owned it. Like we created the
Yes.
postcards because of those
Yes.
four seasons. And, you know, in the dead of winter, you're like, oh my gosh, I hate winter. But then spring comes and it's such a beautiful like sight to see flowers blooming and the lake thawing. And then summer's there and you're like, okay, we get 2 months of this and I'm going to own this.
You're going to use it. Yep.
Right. And then with all of the maple trees in Northern Ontario, the fall is so beautiful and it's so colorful and it's just like this, I don't know. It's just like it smells like
Yeah.
business. Such a weird thing to say, but it smells like business.
I feel like I know what you mean. Like something in that
Thank you.
crispness. Yes.
Yes, it's like the new business year, which starts in September when the kids go back to school. The business new year starts,
Oh my God.
and then fall happens. So it smells like business.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so I know I already said this in the intro, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what makes you a superhuman in your industry.
Absolutely. So I am a brand and business strategist. I focus on working with online coaches and online service providers, course creators, that type of information industry. But what I really love to do is help people get to the core of themselves and use what makes them unique, use their personal brand as the springboard to create really amazing, one-of-a-kind businesses, offers, and brands. So it's not about looking like everyone else and following the most popular strategy. I help people get to who they are and use that to build a strategy that works for them.
Sweet. And how did you get into that?
Long journey, like most people in entrepreneurship, I feel like, but Cliff Notes version, I had a marketing degree, decided not to use it, went into a personal training field instead. That's where I realized, oh, you can brand yourself online. This is a whole thing. That journey led me into working for an entrepreneurial coaching brand that coached hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs every year. And I got to see of like, oh my gosh, high level view of this. So many people aren't making the most of their marketing online. So many people really just aren't seeing the greatness in who they are and how if they position themselves focusing on who they are, their businesses would skyrocket. And eventually after working in that job for long enough, I was like, hey, let's go off on your own because you've got something to say. You're seeing a hole in the marketplace of people are becoming copycats instead of standing out. Why don't you go out into the field and help people do that? So long journey, but we're here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Becoming a category of one, right?
Yes.
That's the whole point.
Absolutely.
It is tough because I'd say I'm a creative, but I also need to be inspired by other people. So it's like, think about like even like remodeling our house. Like I go to Pinterest or House to look at things without I don't look at a blank canvas and be like, oh, this is the color I need to use and the shapes I need to use. So it's hard not to want to copy somebody else because they're doing it successfully.
Absolutely. I always tell people that's normal. And it's normal too when you're getting started because you don't really know what the playing field looks like yet. You've got to test the waters. And so I always say it starts with emulation, but then that needs to shift over to embodiment once you get the lay of the land. Once you kind of figure out what everybody's doing in this online space, it's like, okay, how do I take what I like and how do I make this my own so that I'm not just the copycat, right? My house doesn't look exactly like yours. It looks and feels like mine, but I took what I loved from what I saw.
Yes. So I have a spiritual coach and probably the best investment I ever made personally. And she was saying how everything we know, the things we shared, see, eat, places we live, is essentially a copy of somebody else's creation. And maybe you add your flair and your sizzle to it. So there's nothing wrong, but like verbatim, same color palette, same furniture is like, come on, you got to add your own little sizzle to that. Okay, so then you are, what do you call yourself?
A brand and business strategist.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this really cool program right now called Niche Mastery, a mini course, right?
I do.
Yes. And where can people find that online?
nichemasterycourse.com.
And some really good stuff on there. But we're going to dive into this whole world of niche because, and for the sake of the people that call it a niche, you're in the wrong place. If you can't handle us saying niche, then I can prescribe other shows for you to go and see. But we're up for debate, but I like the word niche better. We're going to just dive in and talk about this space.
Let's do it.
So first question is, what is a niche and why is this important for business?
Yes, niche is such a foundational concept, but it's also a really advanced concept when we get down into it. And so if you're listening and you're rolling your eyes and you're like, I know niche, I don't want to talk about this. Yes, you do. Yes, you do, because it's going to make you more money the more you understand it. I look at a niche as being your corner of the internet that you call home. So it's not about looking at demographics of like, I'm only going to serve moms with 2 kids who make this amount of money and have this amount of free time. No, that's all stuff that we can use to embellish our niche, but your niche is really the group of people that want what you provide and they want it the way that you provide it. So this comes back to knowing who you are, like we just opened with, of you might be a fitness coach. There's a million different fitness coaches on the internet, or you might be a web designer. There's a million different web designers on the internet, but your niche isn't everybody who needs web design. Your niche is everybody who wants web design the way that you do it. So with your flair, with the way that you talk to your clients, with the personality that you have, all of that comes together to make up your niche. It's the group of people that want what you have the way that you are and the way that you're presenting it. So it is really important that we understand who we are and what we do and what makes it different so that we can go out and we can find that niche and confidently market to them. It's also how you get customers that really love working with you and that are not problematic because they know what they signed on for when they signed on for it.
I love this because you just reaffirmed the notion of people that are starting their business for the first time or moving up in business, how they're like, I want to do this thing, but everybody else is already doing it, so I'm not going to do it because why would they buy from me?
Mm-hmm.
And you have the answer to that.
Yeah, I think market saturation is a beautiful thing for everybody, not a bad thing. I think people see that and they're like, there's so many other people out there. People are already doing it. But what people really want is to find somebody that is the perfect fit for them. And the more people that we have online as consumers and the more people that we have online and in the marketplace as service providers, the more choice we have. And the more we get to flock to the people that we really do want to work with, both as a consumer or as the service provider. So it may be saturated out there, but it's not competitive when you know who you are and you know what you do and why it's so good and so unique to yourself.
Yeah, and there's something about like 8 billion people in the world. And if you're a coach or in the service space and all you need is 20 customers,
a handful,
puts things into perspective really quickly.
Absolutely. There's plenty to go around online.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about niche, how do people niche down? Because I think about this work you do and like creating your ideal customer. Who's your avatar? How is this different, or is it different?
There's a lot of overlap, but I think we get lost in the details a lot when we do that, especially when you're just starting out. And when I say that, I mean, when we're talking about creating your ideal client avatar and, saying what time does she get up in the morning? How does she brush her hair? Does she have kids? Like, all of that is great and can help you refine who you're talking to and how. But I think of the niching down process to keep it as simple as possible as it's a refinement. You kind of back yourself into your niche almost. The clearer and clearer that you get on who you are and who you like to work with and how you deliver, the clearer your niche is going to become. So in many ways, we kind of have it a little bit backwards when we start out of you have to have this really clear niche before you get started. You're not going to know the clarity that you're looking for until you actually get started, until you actually start working with people, until you start making content and putting your things out there and being like, okay, How do I like to do this? How do I like to say this? So instead of trying to have this super specific niche figured out in the beginning, what I always tell people to focus on first is, what do you do? And that is a surprisingly difficult question for people to answer in the beginning. What are the results that you are leading everyone in your world to? And already that's going to narrow us way down. Because when so many people get started, they're like, well, I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. And it's like, ooh, okay, but what's the common thread? What is everybody who's looking for X, Y, and Z, what are they coming to you for? We need to be able to call out the specific results. And I feel like what stops people from going there in the beginning is really actually just fear of, what if I can't deliver? And a little bit of that fear is good. A little bit of that fear is not imposter syndrome, but it's actually keeping us in integrity. But at some point, we have to be able to put our flag in the ground and say, this is what I bring to the table. And I will say, I'm speaking very much to coaches right now and service providers where you might be creating your own business out of thin air versus somebody who is in something like, again, the example of web design where it's like, okay, well, I build websites. But because I work with coaches on this, a lot of times I'm like, we need to get to a result. You need to pull that forward. And usually it's either you're helping people make more money, you're helping them with their health, or you're helping them with their relationships. And that can include your relationship to yourself. But from those three categories, which one do you fall into? And that's where I would start. Can you name that first? And then we'll add layers from there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the whole idea of having all this figured out is ludicrous when you first start. I think about the business plan that I had to write for this business because I thought I was going to be applying for grants and stuff for something I wanted to build. And it's like, they're asking me a lot of questions of which I know I don't know the answer to. But a business plan really is an assumption when you first start. So you say, do the work for a little bit, especially if you're first starting out, to kind of figure out who the person is that you should be serving. How long does that process take?
Great question. Great question. My general advice is always to stick to what you think your niche is for at least a month. And if you're especially and if you're primarily marketing on the online space, which I would imagine most of you listening are, make a lot of content. Make a lot of content in those 30 days. You can't make 5 pieces and be like, well, I didn't get a lot of response from people, so this must not be my niche. You need to be overwhelmingly talking about the thing that you provide. So the result that you're leading people to, you need to be making so much content about that to, one, give yourself a chance to see, okay, do I have a lot to say about this? Does this feel like the right place for me? Or am I maybe adjacent to what I thought it was at first? And then other people need to be able to find you. So you need to give it the algorithm a chance to pick up what you do, recognize the keywords that you're using over and over again, talking about this thing, this overarching thing that you guide people to in terms of results, so that it can start showing you to people that it knows are looking for that. So time is a factor here, but I say after about a month of going really hard on one topic of, okay, I think I'm a relationship coach that specializes in parent-child dynamics. Like, you have to go hard on that for a month just to give it an honest, like, Girl Scouts try, right?
Mm-hmm. Girls, guides honor. We can't
yes.
Guides. I wanted to bring up an episode on Lori Harder's podcast recently where she talked about Instagram and how she was pretty broad in the content she was doing, and then she went specific, and it took her so many months to actually get 1,000 new followers. And you think somebody who is predominant as Lori, articulate, easy to connect with, relevant, who already has a lot of followers, you think, wow, how hard is it to get 1,000 followers? And it's for her because what happened was she wasn't really, I wouldn't say she wasn't known for something. She was, and she is. It's just that she started to get more specific and niche down on her content. So she was losing followers because people weren't signed up for that. But now the people that are following her want that content. They're more engaged because it's super specific. And now she's a go-to person for that.
Yeah. We're so afraid of losing followers. It's so funny to me. I somehow sidestepped that early in my career and was able to really just step myself out of that dynamic of more is better online, because it's like, if people don't want to hear from you the way you want to deliver something. If people don't want exactly what it is that you have to offer, you don't want them there. You don't want them following you. And so getting specific is really a gift of maybe you'll go through a little dip like Lori Harder did where you lose a little people at first. But what it's going to do is shine a spotlight on your services and what makes you so special as a coach when you are like, oh no, here's exactly who I'm serving and here's my way of doing it. Mm-hmm. It's going to light up your work. It's going to light up your content for people who have been scrolling through Instagram, just waiting for somebody to say the thoughts that are in their head or to call them out specifically as the unique individual that they are with very specific needs. The more we can hone in on what the uniqueness is, the easier that's going to be. And as I'm having this conversation, I want to clarify because I know that this can be a little confusing of like, okay, but I have to get really, really specific. Like, am I going to run out of things to say? Am I going to close myself off? Instead of thinking it as honing down, which that's usually the language that we use to talk about it because it really is, can you think about it instead of adding layers to what you do? So for example, in my own world, I basically teach marketing at its core. That's a lot of what I do. But I also talk heavily about the coaching industry. That adds a layer to how I teach marketing. I also am very spiritual. So that adds a layer to how I teach marketing because I'll talk about it and marry marketing strategy with things like manifestation. And I talk primarily to women. That's another layer. And so it gets more and more specific by me stacking the things that make me unique and the way I like to talk about things in my truest form when I'm not like, will people on the internet like this? No, if I imagine myself in front of the most perfect ideal client, the person I'm most comfortable speaking to, and I didn't have to filter myself at all, how would I say it? That's how we add these layers, is like we notice where we might be censoring ourselves, and then we say, oh, there's something there. There's a piece of me that I'm silencing that would help me attract my most perfect niche, but right now I'm being afraid of sharing it, so I'm staying in the general, and I'm not getting specific enough for my services to light up for the right people.
There's the thing called the halo effect too, in identifying your target market, is that you think about a bullseye. So picture a bullseye, and the center is your niche, that one person. For me, that one person is Jackie. If I had 1,000 Jackies, I'd be set. But when you attract people, they might fall outside that target. And so outside like the next ring, which is like a halo in the next ring, you can still serve them. They're not Jackie. Maybe it's a Tim. But Tim still needs you. So I know with people that are so afraid of niching down is because they feel that they're going to lose out on all of this market opportunity. When the reality is that if you are too general, you're serving too many people, then it's just going to be a crapshoot for you. And I know I've been there before because when I was doing coaching for a few years, I was like, I don't know who I'm working with. I'm just a business coach for people who are wanting to start or grow their business. Like that is huge range. But then when I narrowed it down to service-based businesses and women who are starting service-based businesses, it got more specific. It helped me understand what kind of content I needed to create. Now I can get more specific. And on top of that, with the content is most people need to be reminded and not necessarily taught. They say what the average consumer needs to hear the message or see a message 7 times before making a purchasing decision. Well, that's probably up to 21 now. And if for stories, for example, on Instagram, if only 20% of your audience sees your stories, and how many times you have to share the same thing for more people to see it and to be reminded of it. And so there's no shame in saying the same thing over again 10 different times because people need to be reminded.
And people don't get bored. Like they really don't, because they're not paying as close attention to your content as you are to your content. And I know that that's a big fear of people with niching down too, is like, well, I'm going to run out of things to say. But you hit the nail on the head where it's like when you go more specific, when you know who it is you're talking to, you unlock a world of depth where suddenly there's so much nuance that you can get into because you know that the person on the receiving end is going to get it because you're like, hey, you are this specific type of person that I want to talk to. So you're going to get when I pull in the, hey, have you ever found yourself in this circumstance or this circumstance? They can go there with you because they've all already signed on of like, I know how Renee does things, so I know when I'm in her world, she's going to talk about it through this lens. I've already signed on that I'm up for that. And so you get to go so much deeper with people because you're not trying to appeal to everyone and anyone. You can get out of the general and get so much more specific. And that's when your content is honestly so much more interesting as well. And it's not just this surface level education. You've got that depth to dig into.
Oh, I think about that with all the people I follow. And like, even if they were to say the same thing 10 different ways, I'm always like, oh, that was a great way of putting it. Or what a great reminder of it's like, I just learned that 2 seconds ago. But so like outside of the content creation though, which is also it's a good benchmark and filter for why it's important to niche down. But what are some of the biggest challenges that you see many facing and getting super specific with their niches?
I think off the bat, what people hit first is they misinterpret what it means to be specific. So we've already kind of talked about how I would rather you think about it as adding layers versus adding restrictions of who you will and will not help. When I think of my niche and how specific I want to get with it, I think of something I like to call qualifiers. And this is when we're thinking about the who. So who is the person that I'm actually working with? You're going to have just a couple broad stroke qualifying characteristics or circumstances of the person that you want to work with. And that's it. That's all you got to have. And sometimes the qualifier is simply that they just want the thing that you have. So if I'm a health coach that teaches gut rehab for certain autoimmune diseases, my qualifiers might just be that somebody needs that, right? And that could be my only qualifier. I don't have to say that this is a student that just graduated from college who is in debt and is like, I need an affordable way to heal my gut. Like, we don't have to get into any of those types of specifics. Just think of what are the broad strokes circumstances that the person I want to help is facing. And that's really all as specific you need to get around the person that you help. The other things that we're going to look at that are going to help you get specific are a lot of these things that I say we discover with time, which are adding on these layers of, okay, how do I like to teach this material? Part of your niche might be that you're attracting people who want a tough love delivery in how you give your service. And that could be a piece of your niche, is that it's people who want it that way, not people who want to be coddled or people who want to have their hand held through the process of whatever it is you do. All of those things that are parts of your brand contribute in this day and age to your niche, because it really is about giving your audience a chance to find the service provider that works for them and with their personality. It's part of what you provide. Who you are, if you are honestly, even if you're an agency, even if you have a group of people, the personality behind your business is part of how you deliver the results that you provide. And so it becomes part of the niche that you attract.
That makes so much sense. And sometimes I wish I would have known this a lot sooner. And I already knew this too. It's like, it was the hypocrite in me was I was teaching this to people, but I wasn't doing it for myself. And worried that I had to stay with this niche. Like, what happens if I don't like it? What happens if I don't want to work with these types of people?
You can always pivot.
Right?
You can always pivot. I'm like a perfect example of this. When I started this business in 2021, I was growing under a different account than I am now. So now I'm under my handle, It's Emily Cincotta. Before I was under the handle, The Launch Babe. And that account like grew like wildfire. It grew from 0 to 30,000 followers in like 6 to 8 months, something very fast in social media time. And I was like, this is great, this is awesome. But the more I was going and going and going, the more I was really finding what my niche was. And I had a hard pivot moment where I was like, uh-oh, you've been talking to every type of business owner so far. And I realized very clearly, I want to take this in the direction of working with coaches. And I ended up deciding to leave that account so that I could build one that was more in line with the niche that I wanted to serve. Now, I didn't have to do that. I could have pivoted the account and let the followers go away. That was just the choice that felt fun and exciting to me. But the moral of the story is you can always pivot. You can always change what you're doing. Your niche is not a death sentence. It's not a life sentence. It's just, how am I going to get my foot in the door today?
Your niche is not a life sentence.
It's
I
not.
love that. I love that. Wow. Okay. So what are you doing with that account? Is it still active or do you shut it down or?
It's doing nothing. It's just sitting there and redirecting, if they're the right audience, people to my current account.
That's crazy to think we spend this time building that up.
Like,
How did you choose to do that? Were you just like, was it a F yes decision, or did it take some time for you to be okay with that change?
it took a little bit of time. I should say it felt like it took a little bit of time. I felt like I was agonizing over it, but in hindsight, it probably took me a month total to make the decision and make the pivot, because it was one of those moments, and I believe this so deeply about entrepreneurship and life, where it was like indecision is going to hurt you so much more than just making a decision and making the most of it. And I didn't want to feel like I was kind of like just treading the water on that account when I knew I wanted to be pivoting, when I knew I wanted to be doing something else. So I was like, Emily, just make a decision and you're going to figure it out as you go. There are no wrong decisions. There's just decisions.
Yes. Oh, as my spiritual therapist said, let me pull up my notes here because we talked about decisions. Trust the process. There is an order to all of this and that everything is perfect.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that.
Yes.
But I really do believe, I was talking about this with my spiritual mentor recently, of like every twist and turn we take on our path, and we might be taking a step that, you know, if somebody else is looking at our journey, it was like, well, this was a mistake or this took you off track for a while. But if we went there, it's because we had to learn something. There was a lesson in there. There's something that we're going to carry back to our businesses with us. And I even think that applies to finding your niche. If you think it's something and you're going to go and you're going to serve these people for a while, you're going to get some really powerful answers about whether or not that's the business you want to be building and the direction you want to take your business. And so you're not wasting time no matter what you're doing. Even if you're niching down, quote unquote, too far, or you're staying too general like I had been on my first account, we're learning something through everything. So give yourself the opportunity to actually learn by picking a niche and sticking to it for a while. You're going to get so many answers that way.
Oh, it's so true. I did that with going from running a PR agency to burning out to then closing it down during due diligence of being acquired to going into coaching for 3 years and then back to PR. And I was like, how is this connected? But let me tell you, the brilliance that came out of those 3 years of coaching and everything I learned in the coaching that I did reflects back on my approach now to PR. Because yes, publicists are a dime a dozen, but how I approach things is totally different.
Absolutely.
And I would have learned any other way.
Mm-hmm. It adds to your unique experience. It adds to the value you bring to the table. It adds to the type of person that you now want to work with and attract. It all adds up in hindsight. It's just hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, when you're in it, it sucks. You're like,
messy.
Why is this happening to me?
Mm-hmm.
And, Tony Robbins says everything happens for you.
Yes, ma'am. It's a gift.
Okay, so any trends or cool things you see in education, the space of learning about niching, or stuff that we should be aware of?
I think the most important thing to be aware of right now is how important the era of personal branding is and is becoming and is already. You really can't hide behind your business. You can't hide behind your computer screen and not show your face and expect to build the type of connections with people right now that are really necessary to drive your business forward in the online space right now. Having a personality is everything, and it's what people are looking for, and they want to find somebody that thinks and speaks what is going on in their brain out loud onto the internet. So standing out right now for your personality is more important than ever before.
I totally agree. And by the way, guys, I have a VIP day. If you want to check it out at wewildwomen.com/VIP day, where I can help you craft the whole PR side of this, your PR strategy to help get it out there. That obviously this is the work that you would do after you work with Emily to get that stuff figured out. And I can't agree with you more, because people want to know who's the face behind the brand. Mm-hmm. Because people buy from those they know, like, and trust. There's a reason why people don't go to Walmart and they'll spend $20 more on the same thing somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And there's a reason why people will go to you or to me. And it's because we're individuals with their own energy and beliefs and ways of doing things that people connect to. They trust us. They like us. So they want to work with us.
And it even goes back to what we were saying before of there's so many options. you have to give people a reason to choose you, to choose your business when it comes to them making a choice. I just was looking around for a web designer recently and I was like, there's so many. How do I choose? I was like, they all look amazing. And a lot of these came from recommendations from other people. Guess who I chose? The person who I loved her social media and the way she was presenting herself more so than what she was showing about her projects. I mean, there was a point where I was like, okay, everybody's work is good. Like everybody that I'm looking at has the same quality level. I'm going to find the person who I feel like I resonate with her as a brand, as a person, as a woman, as another person I'm going to be working with. That's what won my business.
On that, I just did the same thing with a website girl, and my stuff's going to be done the next week. But I cannot emphasize this enough, the importance of your presence on your chosen social media account. And why I say chosen is that if you're pitching the media or you're like publishing your website, whatever's going on, I look at companies that have like 1 million social media icons at the bottom. And I'll go to their YouTube channel and it was updated like 5 years ago, right? Like, go check out my YouTube. Or like, go to LinkedIn. It's all locked down. You can't see anything. So I say choose one and own it. Instagram's great. Why this is important for the media, because if there's a journalist that is writing a story, we'll say for designers, they have a story they're writing for Martha Stewart Living about the most elegant ways to soundproof your office, looking for interior designer. Guess where they're going to go when you pitch them? They're going to go to your social media account, because if you're, especially in design, they're going to want to know the work that you've done. And if you're not active on there, then nope, it's the next person that's going to get the job. It's the next person that's going to get the media coverage.
Social media absolutely matters. This is bringing me back to when I used to do guest bookings for another podcast, and it was one of the first things that I looked at. I would read through their pitch. I'd be like, okay, they sound interesting. Let me go check them out online. If I couldn't find anything, they didn't get booked. It was like, where's the social proof? Where is the backing up behind what you say that you can do and that you can talk about? I need some proof in the pudding. And I had this reminded to me so powerfully recently too of how important, bringing it back to niche, it is that your social media content also be niched. Not that you're just there, but that you have evidence that you can do what you say that you're going to do. Somebody reached out to me in the DMs, and I get DM messages of people who want to work together or want to connect all the time, right? Everybody does when you have a business online. But this one was really good. Like, she sent me 2 really good voice memos. She did her research. She caught my attention. It didn't sound generic. And she was like, let's hop on a call so we can talk about how I can help your business with X, Y, and Z. I was very sold by her voice notes. I was like, oh, this was actually good. And I'm impressed at how much time you took and thought you put behind this pitch. So I went over to her page to be like, okay, let me just validate what she said she can do. I went to her page and she had a large following, something like 15,000 followers, so a good size, and she had good engagement and it didn't look like bots. But there was not a single thing on her page that pointed to her business, that pointed to what it was she said that she could help me with. And I was scrolling through and I was like, well, now where's the trust? There's nothing there for me to rely on, for me to lean back on, or client
And then
results.
she became your customer. And you helped her.
Flipped the pitch.
Yeah.
But it's not just enough to have the presence either. If you are trying to run your business online, you have to have that niched content there.
Yeah. It's so true. Does anyone else feel like a little bit ashamed and guilty right now? We need to put this content out. And I know like part of this, and we only have so much time, but part of the questions that you put in the intake form was like, how much of your personal stuff do you put out there versus brand stuff? And why don't we just jam on this for 4 minutes while we're talking about it?
Absolutely.
So like, what do you think the right cadence is?
So when it comes to how much of you do you show, one, you get to have the final say always. You don't have to be blasting your life on the internet. I actually think it's easier to have just a set of qualities that you're like, okay, when I'm stepping online, I'm stepping into this version of me, this leadership persona. Here's the things that I share. And so you have some boundaries between you and between your personal life for social media, because I love boundaries. We need them. We love them. But when it comes to choosing, okay, what actually should go in my content? What is off niche? What's on niche? I always say, what are the things about your life that are inseparable from the way that you do business? So for a lot of people I work with, just to give a tangible example, some of this is being a mom And it's not the case for every mom who's also a business owner, but for some women, the way they run their business and the way that they run their lives, if they don't have childcare, for example, it's like, I can't separate that I'm a mom when I do business. It's going to impact how I can schedule my calls. It's going to impact how I can create content. So it makes sense for you to bring a little bit of mom life into your content. You're still going to be through the lens of whatever you do in your business, but that would be something that makes sense to share if you're like, I can't detach me as a mom from this business. It's all part of it. And so what are those things in your life? For me, one of those has become very deeply throughout the last year, my spirituality. You're going to see that when you come to my page. You don't have to subscribe to it to be able to get value out of my content, but it is who I am, and it's inseparable from how I do business because it influences how I talk to my clients. It influences how I think about certain tangible strategies and how I present them to the world. And so it's like, what are those things? And as you go through and think about it, you might be censoring some of those without realizing it because you're like, well, this doesn't apply to everybody. But hello, if we're bringing that back to our niche, those are probably the things that are the magic of you, that if you did start to work them into your content, because you're like, this is such a big piece of me and who I am and how I show up, you're going to start to attract people that are even more in alignment with how you want to provide your services.
Yes. So these 3 women who hired me to fly down to Florida to do a VIP day with them, one of the big things for them that they discovered in finding me on social Instagram was how much they loved that I was a mother, an entrepreneur, but I wasn't just all of one of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not like over the top mommy. Like I love my kids to death and I do a lot with them, but not everything is about that. And so like I sprinkle that in because I want my followers to know I am a mother and I love my kids, and we've designed this life around being able to have time with them. But I also love working. I love going to the gym. I love being with my husband, of which we share too. And so that attracts a certain type of audience. It's not going to attract the stay-at-home moms that love being the stay-at-home moms that want to learn how to do a side hustle because maybe it's a different conversation. But I love the reminder of to just keep being you.
Yeah.
Keeping you. And here's the thing. Spiritual therapist, coming back to her because this is all fresh, is if you sat next to somebody on a bench, not touching, you can't see the person, hear them, smell them, taste them, get rid of all the senses, and you're sitting next to them, they still can feel your essence. And even just by me saying that, people are like, Renee, that's too woo, you're crazy, I don't want to work with you. I genuinely believe that, and guess what? You can actually feel it online too, and that's what attracted me to you. I was like, I love how you show up online. I love your energy. I love how you smile, and you're smart and what you talk about. I was like, I know she knows what she's talking about. I don't have to know her to know that when she comes on my show, it's going to be a great conversation. So for me to assess guests, because I get pitched all the time, is are they articulate? Do they have a little bit of a personality that they can share and just be fun? Because the way that I describe this is like we're going out for a cup of coffee together and we're just chilling, talking about life and business. And it has to be fun. So people do subscribe to you.
They do.
Get rid of all the senses. That is your essence.
I love that. And it just always makes me think too, nobody wants to talk to a textbook. Like nobody wants to talk to a fact machine. If that's all you're sharing, you just, congratulations, you've Googled resulted your page. Like that's all it is.
ChatGPT.
Right? Exactly. More accurate for where we are.
You know what's hilarious about that is that I actually ChatGPT'd before this interview and I said, what questions do I ask a niche expert
oh my gosh,
as a guest on my podcast? And they pulled up some pretty interesting questions, none of which I just came up with my own, but I was like, that's interesting that it can guide you. But yes, it sounded like a robot.
Yeah. I mean, that's an important piece of ChatGPT too that I want people to remember. It cannot totally replace the magic of you in your marketing. You have to know who you are first to use it to accurately pump out amazing things for your brand.
It's an amplification tool. That is it.
Yes.
Okay. This has been great. I love it. I have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that?
Oh my gosh. What does it mean to be a wild woman to me? Free of inhibition of what other people think of you. And I feel like that's even beautiful to the conversation that we're having right now of, can you just exist in the way that you want to exist, in the way that you want to put yourself out into the world, and be free of any inhibition of how it's going to be received, and just know that you and your expression is appropriate and is exactly what the world needs.
Amen.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
Come find me on Instagram. That is my home. That's where I play. My handle is It's Emily Cincotta. If you want to check out the niche course that we have been talking about, I highly recommend it. It is just $37. I wanted to keep it super, super affordable so that everybody can get it in their hands. You can go to nichemasterycourse.com and check it out there.
Sweet. All those are in the show notes. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.